Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric and Matt, and this is Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit, your beacon of freedom and the American way of life. Tune in every Friday for a new episode as we dive into the world of liberty and what makes our country great. All right, welcome back. Today we're going to be getting into a couple of things, and I'd like to also acknowledge that we are filming today's podcast, and it's going to be on our YouTube channel as well. Go over and check it out on Iraq Veteran 8888 if you'd like to see a video version. And if you are tuning in here on YouTube, be sure to follow us over on Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit. We post our podcasts every week, and they're about an hour long, and we try to dive into a lot of cool subjects. So yeah, let's get into today's subjects, and we're going to really, and look, this one's going to ruffle some feathers.
Just a little bit, probably.
Yeah. So what's today's subject, Matt?
Is Trump really 2A?
That question gets thrown around.
It's a very fair question.
That's a very good question. Okay, so the giant issue, the thing that people is burning their ears right now, is people are asking, well, is Trump really a pro-2A president? What's his track record like? What is his end game when it comes to the 2A world? And we're going to try to break into this a little bit and try to analyze it as best we can. There's a lot of things to look at from a lot of different areas and situations. And when you think about, not only where the 2A world is today, but you think about things such as red flag laws. You look at, let's go back to Bush's presidency and look at something like the Patriot Act. A lot of people think that the Patriot Act really paved the way for things such as red flag laws, which you see the NRA has obviously been really on top of wanting to support and push through red flag gun confiscation orders at a federal level, and they've been pressuring Trump to do it. And it's a really scary situation when you look at this kind of thought police aspect of what red flag laws can do. We've already done a couple of videos over on Gun Gripes on Iraq Veteran 8888 related to red flag laws, so you know where we stand on that. And if you don't, check it out. I mean, obviously we don't agree with them, but red flag laws are a pretty scary thing. And Trump has sort of thrown around the football, so to speak, of supporting federal level red flag confiscation orders, which are very scary. Americans have been killed in the carrying out of these red flag confiscation orders in states where they have it at a state level as a state law. I know Maryland's one state, and one gentleman was killed over that, and it's a very scary situation.
That was the elderly gentleman that they came knocking on his door at like 2 a.m. in the morning, I believe, and he had a surprise for him, and they had a surprise for him. And red flag laws in and of themselves are unconstitutional, and I wholeheartedly agree they're heinous, and they shouldn't even be on the docket. They shouldn't even be considered. It is not the responsibility of the local government to determine who should and shouldn't have firearms. It's not up to them. It's people will get hurt. And in this instance, somebody was killed over hearsay, somebody's family member or somebody's friend saying, "Oh, this person has guns," and there was no due process, none of that. And if there was due process, they would have found out that it was unwarranted.
Okay, so getting back to Trump, one of the statements that keeps getting thrown around when it comes to Trump is the statement that is along the lines of, take the guns first, due process later, right? Yeah. Trump was on record for saying that. And this was obviously back when the NRA was really, really pressuring Trump over red flag laws. And I'd like to just kind of touch on that for a minute, is that during, Trump's first election cycle, his first term.
Right.
He got an A+ rating from the NRA, and he spoke at the NRA annual meeting, and it was this big deal. And they, approved of him being
endorsed
elected.
him. Yeah,
they endorsed him, I guess what I'm really trying to say. So they endorsed Trump. And then, all this talk of red flag laws, and then obviously Vegas happened. And when in that particular situation, they claimed the bump stock was used and all of this stuff. And then Trump, through the grapevine, ended up going after bump stocks. This is well documented. And of course, we see the results of it because now bump stocks are banned, and it's through executive fiat. Okay, so we look at executive order versus, let's just say, there's a lot of things that go into that, right? And executive orders are a scary thing. And the issue is that when Trump says, all right, well, we're banning bump stocks. See, the ATF is actually not, they're part of the executive branch, okay?
Correct.
They don't make laws, all right? They interpret laws, they enforce laws. So it's a really scary thing when the ATF can come to the table and go, well, the president told us that he don't like that, so now we don't like that, and this is what we're going to do. And that's a really scary thing. It goes against the nature and the spirit of how we pass laws in this country and how laws are passed and enforced. We have checks and balances, and we have separation of power for that reason. Right? There's a process that laws have to go through in order to be passed into law, and ratified as part of law or whatever. Or, brought into law. So the issue becomes with that is that now you set a very, very distinct and horrible precedence in place, because now a future president could come along that hates guns and say, oh, well, wait a minute, we get this executive fiat ability here, this executive order. So wait a minute, I can just sign an executive order saying that an AR-15 trigger that is too light, that it's a machine gun, or that, oh, your finger, just because you can shoot it semi-automatic really fast, makes it a machine gun. So that's the difficulty, is by giving them the keys to Pandora's box and opening up the ability for a future anti-gun president to just completely do whatever the heck they want and have the keys to the ship, so to speak. That is the difficulty. It establishes a very nasty precedence for moving forward. And, the NRA probably more than likely gave him guidance on bump stocks and told him that, hey, this is the low-hanging fruit or whatever. Obviously they pushed him on red flag laws. So when you look at all of the public statements that the NRA made in relation to bump stocks, in relation to red flag laws, in relation to this and that, Trump followed in suit. He acted upon the things that they wanted the most, or the things that they were the most publicly visible about. Okay.
Right. And I think that one of the big issues with how all of that happens is when you get an executive order from the president and it goes to an organization like the ATF, a lot of those are subjective. So there's no written, there's no exact written way to carry that out. It says, this is what the order is, interpret this how you want, and carry it out how you wish, which is exactly why the ATF has the bad rap that it has, because they go in and they don't really know what they're doing. They interpret it one way. It gets, they play the game of telephone. It goes from the top down. You need to do this, confiscate this. These are now illegal. Well, what makes it illegal? We don't know. We just know that this has been categorized as illegal, so now they're banned, and now everybody that has it is a felon. So how do you confiscate these? Well, I don't know. Let's go shoot dogs and kick in doors, and we just take them by force. So, and a great example of that is when you see all of these, the ATF having to backpedal on a lot of the stuff like the AA-12. Is it a firearm? Is it a SBS? The origin. I know they had some issues. So there's no way for them to interpret this correctly. So they'll say it's legal, and now you have these manufacturers selling these legal firearms, and then now they're like, no, we got it wrong. We as a government organization got it wrong. How about that? Now you guys have to send everything back, and they have to either give refunds or give credits or modify these to now meet their current legal requirements, which they don't even know if it's going to be legal in the next 6 months because it's not documented. It's all subjective.
Right.
So that's where the real problem lies with that process. Just that part of the process is that it's not written in stone. It's up to interpretation of when the next leadership comes in. How are they going to interpret that? Are they going to just do whatever they want? Okay,
here's a good example. All right, so not only do you have the situation that Matt is talking about, but we can take it a step further. All right, there's still a lot of Obama era appointees at the ATF.
Yeah.
Okay. both in leadership and in, enforcement, what have you, right? All of these different things, compliance, enforcement, and there's still plenty of Obama-era appointees at the ATF. Well, one of Trump's big things was, the Obama administration's ATF were the ones that approved bump stocks in the first place. That was one of his whole reasonings for banning bump stocks is, it was he blamed it. He passed the buck onto the Obama administration, but yet the people calling the shots at the ATF are still there. So why not? You know what I mean? Like if you care about the ATF making decisions that are more in line with your reported pro-gun stance, well, then wouldn't you put pro-gun ATF agents in there or at least that are neutral to the point that they understand it in a way that if it meets a definition or it doesn't, or that they're writing, or you know what I mean, like coming up with good rulings, and ruling is a bad word for it because they don't make laws. Right. That's the thing. So now, we have all these Obama era appointees. Well, during the Obama administration, the common thread that gets passed around is, Obama did not pass XYZ in terms of gun control. We have more gun control now under Trump than we had under Obama. Well, a lot of Obama's actions that were passed were executive actions, not executive orders. And from my understanding, they're two very different things. An action is more of a, hey, this is how I feel. This is what I'd like you to do if you feel like it. It doesn't really have the same weight as actually signing a real executive order. Executive order is definitely a form of executive fiat. And lots of presidents in the past have used executive orders to circumvent, the system, the checks and balances.
The legislative process.
Obama did, during his presidency, sign a lot of executive orders. Now, one piece of anti-gun dealings that we have to deal with from the Obama administration is the ban on 7.6 ammunition. Now, that may not affect as many people, at least in their eyes, and that's why they went for that as a low-hanging fruit. So I don't know if you guys remember, both listening and watching, but during the Obama administration, there was a ban on 7.6 ammunition. 5.45 by 39 millimeter steel core ammunition was banned from import. That was a low-hanging fruit for them because, and let's just be fair here, that there is a disproportionate number of people that own AR-15s and shoot AR-15s to people that own AK-47s to begin with, right? But then when you compare the amount of AK owners that shoot 7.62 by 39 to ones that shoot 5.45, that was a low-hanging fruit for the Obama administration because they knew, or maybe they were told or someone gave them the data, that there's far less people that shoot 5.45 over 7.62 by 39. So, hey, we'll go after 7.6 because it's a low-hanging fruit. Maybe people won't get up in arms enough, they won't complain enough, and then therefore we can get this as a win. One of the 1,000 paper cuts that they're looking for to kill gun owners. Well,
they had to check that box, and that was the one they had to check.
Now, remember, at one point, the Obama administration was also talking about banning M855 ammunition with the green tip. All right, and what happened there? People got pissed.
Nope.
All right, and we were one of the groups of people that, we made a video about it where you guys may remember we were standing in front of the Alamo in Texas, and we were talking about, hey, how would you defend your Alamo without M855? I mean, AR-15 is America's rifle. Well, where's America's ammunition? That was our argument. What happened? The ban on M855 went away. They decided not to do it. And then talks started spreading of bills that they wanted to pass to prevent the federal government from banning things like that in the future. Dare I say, even reversing the ban on 7.6 ammunition in the future. I don't have the documents right in front of me, but it was a representative out of Florida that put in a bill 1016. I don't remember the exact number. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll put the information in the description box below. But they did introduce a bill to limit the federal government's ability to ban the importation of certain types of ammunition, deeming it as being unconstitutional.
Yeah, good for them. That overreach needs to stop. And I'm glad they started it back then because it definitely helps out now because you have something to lean back on and say, hey, we did it then. So we can do it now.
Now, to be fair, during the Obama administration, we had Sandy Hook, and there was also in a very similar series of events as to what happens in the Trump administration. There was this tragedy, and these politicians get put under a ton of pressure to do something, right? And Obama was the same way. Now, he proposed everything under the sun. He supported this, supported that. Yes, supported this idea, that idea, this type of legislation. I mean, that's well documented. It's out there. We don't have to talk about it here.
Right.
But his ability to act on it was nothing more than just puff and what do they call it? Puff and providence, or what do they call that?
I have no idea.
Circumstance.
Yeah.
A bunch of puff, right? They weren't able to make anything happen because they just didn't have the support. Okay. So fast forward to the Trump administration and the action on bump stocks. All right, well, we have this. All right, so substitute Sandy Hook for another tragedy. All right, substitute it for this shooting in Vegas.
Right.
All right, now you've got this catalyst here where you can either do something or not do something. All right, what happened? We got bump stocks banned through executive fiat. So
yeah, and then you have again that open interpretation on what is a bump stock, or for a while there when it first happened, nobody really knew what constituted the different designs because there was more than one. So which ones are legal? Which ones are illegal? Which one makes you a felon? What happens if you don't turn it in? Are you a felon now because you have one in your safe? Because I guarantee you, probably 80% of those, nobody was just walking up and handing those in. So we have a very large number of felons apparently within the United States just for having those. But if you go back to Trump, is Trump as two-way as everybody thinks he is, or if you think he's two-way at all? I think this is what happens when you get someone that comes from the business world. And when you're in the business world, when you're leading companies and I'm not talking like small mom and pop businesses, I'm talking about when you're running major corporations and you have thousands of employees, you cannot be the master of all. So all good leadership surround themselves with who they think is the best in their field, which is exactly what he's doing as a president. No experience in politics. He surrounds himself with people that he thinks can fill those roles. And unfortunately, when you are at the top and you and you're in an ivory tower, let's not make any assumptions. He's in an ivory tower. He's always been in an ivory tower. The people he surrounded himself with also live in ivory towers. However, they grandstand themselves as being of the people. So in his mind, his leadership team are very connected to their constituents. Unfortunately, they're not. So he's taking what they say as gospel. That's what's good for the people. And who he has in positions of power have absolutely no idea what's good and what's bad. So he's making these decisions based off of business acumen, which really doesn't apply in this situation. And he's executing these orders based off of the information he's given by his leadership team, which is bad information. And this is how we get to the position that we're in now, where you have ultimately bad decisions being made from people that he thought he could trust. And I'm telling you, you cannot trust them because they have absolutely no idea what they're talking about.
That's a great point that you brought up there, Matt. Like Henry Ford, I believe it was Henry Ford that said, hey, I may not be the smartest guy in the world, but I hire the smartest people.
Right. Which is usually done.
And which is usually done, right? So just because someone is the head of this giant company, they own a big company, they employ a lot of people, they may not always have all the answers, but they hire people that do. And I can understand that. Trump can certainly defer certain issues to teams of people that he may select, or certain people within his presidential cabinet that he can say, hey, what's your opinion on X, Y, Z, right? I mean, We see that with the dealing of COVID, which we're not going to go there, but it's the same type of thing, right? If you're not expert in subject matter A, well, then you hire an expert or whatever, and then they give you recommendations on what you should or shouldn't do, and then you take that into account and you make your decision. Completely understandable. I think one of the big issues here, too, is that I believe that Trump has put a little bit too much faith in the NRA and what they have to say.
Absolutely.
And I think that I know the NRA has had their hand in every piece of anti-gun legislation for over the last 100 years. So it's well documented. It's out there. I mean, they supported, the stuff back in '68. They supported the '94 crime bill. I mean, gosh, there's so many things. It would take us hours to really go through and dig, but we'll put some links in the description box below where you guys can research it on your own. There are tons of, if you're listening on YouTube, if you're on the podcast, you'll have to go research it on your own, but
we might be able to put it in the show notes.
Possibly.
Well, yeah.
But there are tons of instances where the NRA has supported anti-gun legislation and in many cases helped draft anti-gun legislation. So it's like you have to think about what the overall motive is, right? So the big question is, okay, is Trump anti-gun? Well, not necessarily, because the reason I'll say that is because just because someone is given bad information, bad guidance, bad advice related to a certain topic, right? And because they act on that bad advice without knowing better or doing the research on their own, doesn't make them a bad person or make them anti-gun. It just makes them ill-informed. So I would say at worst, one could assume that maybe his stance on the Second Amendment isn't strong enough that he cares to look into it enough, or that he cares to know enough about it to make an informed decision. It would be like someone asking us about how do you feel about XYZ related to the gun world. Well, we would know because we're in the gun world. We deal with it all the time, and obviously we're extremely pro-gun. So anything that could be taken even the tiny bit off, we're obviously not going to agree with it. So one could assume either that would be the situation, or two, he just is looking at it from the position of, oh, well, the NRA endorses me, so the NRA told me it's okay to ban bump stocks. The NRA told me it's okay to support red flag gun confiscation orders at a federal level. And the NRA, wanted me to call up people like Dan Crimshaw or whoever else and say, yeah, good job on pursuing those red flag confiscation orders, right? One could assume that because of that NRA endorsement, that he would just look at them as being the gospel on what the status is of the 2A, right?
Right.
To his mind, right? And one could assume that the optics of that situation, when you go, oh, well, the NRA's the biggest, pro-gun lobby group or blah, 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 whatever. Or if you're told that by a bunch of staffers, or if you're told that by a group of people that are close to you, well, of course you're going to, take that into account and go, well, if I've got their endorsement, well, then I must be good. That means I'm okay with the 2A crowd. Hey, put the check in the box.
That's exactly what's happening.
But that's the issue, is he thinks he's good. He thinks he's skating by good with the 2A community. But I want to acknowledge something else that I feel really beckons to this particular podcast as well, is you look at the first couple of years of Trump's presidency, we had complete control of the ship. We had control of the House, the Senate. We had not like a super majority, but we had a red enough majority to where we could have gotten quite a bit passed if we wanted to. And we made multiple gun gripe episodes, okay, over on our YouTube channel and everything, where we talk about, why are we not picking from pro-gun legislation like ordering off Taco Bell menu? Why didn't we get national carry reciprocity? Why didn't we get the Hearing Protection Act, which was a bill that would remove suppressors from the NFA? We know we're not going to kick the NFA in the balls overnight. We know that. Okay. But, just like the left and the antis, I'm just going to say the antis,
yeah.
Just like the anti-gunners try to give us death by 1,000 paper cuts. Okay. Getting it back is the same way. We can't just say wipe the NFA off the table, but we can start with suppressors. Then we can go to short-barreled rifles, short-barrel shotguns, and eventually maybe even machine guns. But getting it one little piece at a time would have been a real big win for Trump. We could have, stonewalled all of that through and made it happen. We had weak leadership on the Republicans' part. They caved in to the pressure, both from the left and from the antis, and they decided not to have any of those bills go through because they caved into the pressure because of political events that were happening
the money
in the
is
country.
Good. The money is good. And when you were explaining about the NRA and the legislation, how they had their hand in every piece of anti-gun legislation for the last 100 years, it was very reminiscent of how government contracting works, and not government contracting in the way that you would think that you're going overseas and doing government contracting work, but on the opposite side of procurement. So if you work for company A and you sell sell or you manufacture widgets, and you want to sell these widgets to the government, the federal government, you have and I know this because I used to be in government contracting, so I've won quite a few multi-million-dollar contracts based off of this model. You write the RFP. The RFP is a request for proposal. So if you want to sell widget A to the federal government, you write a proposal, an official proposal to this organization, whatever organization it is, whether it's the VA. Each one of them have their own individual procurement offices. And you say, hey, this is a great widget, and this is what it's going to do for you. This is what it does. This is how much it'll save you. So you're writing this long proposal about why they want to buy your widget. You send that to them, and then they say, great. There's 15 other companies that do something similar. Why do we want to buy your widget? Well, now you do a RFQ, a request for, or they put out a RFQ, a request for quote, and then you actually have to fill out all of this stuff. But since you wrote the RFP, you wrote the request for proposal, you know the exact details and specifications that need to be met to win this contract. So it's very similar to how the NRA, there's no way around it. They helped to write this legislation. They know the ins and outs of this legislation. Therefore, when they present it to Congress or the president, they know exactly what's going on. They're in the pockets, and that's how all this stuff happens, is because since they wrote the proposal, right, they're going to get it. They're going to get the business.
There's a double-edged sword. Okay. Also, the other end of what Matt is talking about is that they know that a lot of the things that get proposed won't pass as well. Right. All right. So, like, let's say the anti-gunner side of the situation, they're going to, we got the worst assault weapons ban in history, and Feinstein's assault weapons ban, and Pelosi's at it again. And don't get me wrong, like, that's very real. Like, these people are hell-bent on destroying our rights on a regular basis, and it's important to bring attention to that, and no one's going to refute the fact that that's not an important thing to get at. But I believe that they are equally at fault and equally culpable for proposing pro-gun things that they know won't go anywhere, as they are damning anti-gun things that they know won't go anywhere. They want lame duck politics. They don't want pro-gun legislation to advance just as much as they don't want, anti-gun legislation to go forward, because if anti-gun legislation goes forward, well, all of a sudden, we're not doing our job. We're losing to the antis. But see, they work themselves out of a job. If you do too much and you get pro-gun legislation after pro-gun legislation, pushed through, and you're winning left and right. And yeah, that's great. That's ultimately what we all want in the 2A community, is for these great things to happen in terms of pro-gun legislation. But from the lobbyist standpoint, which the NRA is a lobbying group, they don't want to go too far too fast, because then they work themselves out of a job. So they are in the business of balancing fear, not tipping the scales in favor of people that have been disenfranchised and want the scale to tip in their favor, just like all of us want it to, right? There's an entire group of Americans that, as we stand right here, live in this country in the way that, they will never know what it's like to be able to go into a gun shop and just buy a machine gun like it's a normal thing, right? An entire group of Americans have been disenfranchised. However, that young person that wasn't alive back when you could do that, like myself, like Matt, sure, if we have $25,000, $35,000, $50,000, we can go buy a machine gun from a collector that has one, and it's transferable and it's no big deal. Oh yeah, but no big deal. You just got to come up with $35,000. No big deal.
And wait a year.
One could say, and then wait a long time. So one could say that there's that's a disenfranchisement of gun owners out there who essentially have not been given the same girth as people that came before us in regards to certain things within the 2A community. So wait a minute, the guy that was my age back in 1980. So does he have mega 2A rights just because he was born before me? Or, you weren't here soon enough. Sorry, you missed the train. No, that's not how it works. Machine guns are either legal or they aren't. Machine guns are just highly regulated, All right.
Right.
So the thing is, it's regulatory headache that has created all of these situations. It was the Hughes Amendment in the first place that even tried to make or required companies to come up with some form of a minor workaround by creating bump stocks in the first place.
Yep.
The reason that braces exist, the reason that bump stocks exist, all of these little strange workarounds and loopholes only exist because the Hughes Amendment was there to begin with, and that was one of the things that the NRA supported was the Hughes Amendment. So it's cause and effect, all of it. It all trickles downhill, right? So to say, is Trump anti-gun? I don't think he's anti-gun as much as people might, want to foam at the mouth and say he is. I think he's misinformed. He's listening to the wrong people.
I agree. I think that he's severely misinformed. I don't think he's anti-gun, although he does hail from New York. So that's really all he knows. He has he's probably had a personal protective team around him for every day. That's just the way that he rolls. I think that I don't want to say the word pandering, although I do think that he leans heavily on whatever is going to get him the most votes. And unfortunately, right now, in the current state of affairs and the social climate, that is going to be the opposite of the Second Amendment. And I really, really hope that he can remove himself from himself and do the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. It's a really scary time right now in politics and in the 2A community because, we were one Supreme Court justice away from being in a really, really bad situation in terms of the Second Amendment. If we would have gotten a couple of really bad Supreme Court justices in this last time around, it could turn into some scary things. But, all right, let's look at that. Let's look at the Supreme Court. Okay, so a lot of people view Trump's Supreme Court picks as being middle of the line, if not somewhat freedom-leaning people, right? And it's generally accepted that his Supreme Court pick's pretty solid. Okay, one could make that argument. Okay, all right, hoorah, that's great. All right, how many Second Amendment related cases have actually gone to the Supreme Court to be heard? Now, these are cases that people have made a really big deal about, right? We'll put a link in the description box below that gives you a couple of these proposed cases. But the short end of this, but without going into a ton of detail, I'll just say that all the Second Amendment cases that have gone to the Supreme Court have been passed back down to lower courts, right. And the Supreme Court won't hear it because it's politically sensitive.
Correct. And they're refusing to hear any further cases, I think, for the rest of the year.
Right. But in the same week, though, they push forward a LGBT-related case. All right. Now, look, I'll quickly mention this. We are one of the only gun channels on YouTube that openly supports the LGBT community. Okay. I don't believe in patronizing people and tearing people apart. I believe in unity. I want people to get together and understand that the Second Amendment is bigger than one person, one group of people. Breaking off into tribes is the wrong answer. What we've always pushed for, we don't want everybody to break off into tribes. You do you, I do me. Look, you live a certain lifestyle, you live your lifestyle. We're okay with that. You just do your thing. You do you, I do me. We support the LGBT community because they have actually become a pretty decent subset of gun owners, right?
Absolutely.
In the last couple of years, some of the largest groups have been females and have been the LGBT community. And then here, just within the last 3 months or so, we've seen a huge surge in gun sales across the United States. And I don't have the data in front of me, but the theory is that a heck of a lot of those people are folks more left-leaning or maybe more anti-gun leaning that might not have saw the value of gun ownership before, but now they're starting to get kind of woke to that a bit. And the theory is that the 2A is becoming more and more important to all sides of the political stratum than it was in previous years. So we've never had a more strongly unified 2A community than now in terms of the diversity of people who are arming themselves. And that's worth mentioning. So the Supreme Court heard an LGBT-related case, but then denied all 2A cases. I hate that they didn't hear the 2A cases. Of course I hate that. But at least, that community got something done, which, you got to hand it to them. At least pressuring them to make something happen. At least they got something done for them.
Well, I threw my hands up in the air because I find it interesting that the Supreme Court as an organization, I'm going to call them an organization, because at that point, what they're doing is they're picking and choosing which laws and which cases they want to hear. And I don't think that should necessarily be the case. I think that
they should have to hear it.
They should have to. I can't go to my court and if they say, hey, Matt, you're due in court for speeding. You know what? I'm going to choose that I don't want to hear this case at this moment, but let me circle back.
Yeah, we're going to let the cop that pulled you over decide.
Let me circle back with you in about a year when I'm ready and the social climate has changed and I feel like I should come in and hear this case. I'll still pay my fine when I hear it. But until then, we're good. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
And especially with things, and usually when you're going to the Supreme Court, they're federal cases, they're big cases, and they should be a first in, first out policy. I mean, if you're gonna put in a case in a docket and you want to be heard, at least give them the privilege and the respect to hear what they have to say, and then choose to have it retried or even come back for an actual court date when it's time. But don't just flat out make a blanket statement to say, you know what, because of the social climate, we're going to choose not to hear anything about this specific subject. Which happens to be
if a
firearms.
grievance gets to the point where it is so weighed in someone's mind and heart and thought process that it makes it to the Supreme Court, that it even makes it that far, why wouldn't they want to hear it? And my thing is, okay, how do they know that the 2A case that they're potentially choosing to hear or not to hear is as politically dirty to them as they think it is, unless it's not like they didn't know what the case was that they were going to hear.
Right.
They don't just go, oh, that's 2A related, bye. No, they look through, because I guarantee you they're not going to make the decision whether or not to hear the case based on nothing more than just the baseline idea of what it's related to.
Correct.
Okay, so by proxy, they have heard the case. They know. They have an opinion. They just won't share their opinion. And what that comes down to, and I don't want to get into a ton of detail on this because I don't know if we have time for it, but you guys might remember the guy I want to say he was in California, but the whole situation where the feds agreed not to prosecute the guy that was making the ARs in his basement. All right, that whole thing. He didn't have a manufacturing license, and what he would do is he would indicate the part in the machine, and the customer would hit the button on the machine. Well, the customer made the gun, not him. So he wasn't manufacturing a firearm technically, and that goes into the whole rigmarole of, what part on the AR-15 is actually a gun and what isn't.
Right.
And we're not going to get there. We're not going to go there. Okay, but it's worth mentioning that the case got dropped. They chose not to prosecute him. Basically, they made a deal. And the reason they made the deal is because they knew that if it went to court and that they established case law related to, obviously, then you would have case law in place where someone could go back and see what happened with the outcome of this case. And in my mind, that's what case law is, right? Case law is where you go, all right, here are similar lawsuits to my lawsuit. Here's how they resolved, and this gives us a bit of food or basically ammunition to load in our legal gun to shoot at the situation, right? So that they can basically see where past cases have resolved in a very similar manner. Right. So they didn't want case law coming out of this particular situation. If you think about it, it's dirty because they knew they were in the wrong to prosecute him in the first place, and they knew after seeing all of the evidence and everything that they were going to lose. So when they know they're going to lose, they don't hear the case. They make a deal. So in my mind, when the Supreme Court says, we're not going to hear this, well, the Supreme Court carries the heaviest weight in terms of case law, like having that in place, right? So, of course, the Supreme Court doesn't want to hear a 2A case, because if they use even halfway amount of integrity and they have to side with the people on 2A, then it establishes all of these, like Heller versus DC or DC versus Heller, right? Dick Heller.
They set the precedence on it.
Right. So, see, they don't want to establish that precedence that then gives case law, have all this case law in place that allows them to kind of go, okay, well, this is what happened here, 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 and here. Well, guess what? You can't do this. So it's a scary set of circumstances. But to circle back to Trump, okay, all right, so say that the general consensus is that people say, all right, well, Trump's Supreme Court picks were good picks. Well, if we're talking about 2A here and they refuse to hear 2A cases, why does that matter at all? Who cares? Because they won't hear the case anyway.
Well, that goes to being Supreme Court judges being a perpetuitous position. The only way they get out is if they choose. That's not an elected position. They don't have to fight for votes or anything like that. Which,
a very political position.
Right. So when it comes down to it, they serve in perpetuity until they either die or they resign. So they have no reason to pander. So if they feel like they don't want to set a precedence, they're already been placed there by the president, so they already lean a certain way. Now, traditionally, when a new president comes in, they will go through and they're either adding their own Supreme Court picks to help garner their support for their side, if you want to say. I hate saying that, whether it's one side or the other side, but they do, and they go through and they want to make sure that the Supreme Court justices that they have in place are going to back their legislation, and they're playing the game. They're not going to hear certain cases, especially with November coming up. They don't want to put anything in place that's going to hinder their election process or their ability to get reelected. So, unfortunately, the Supreme Court does act in a way that always is not advantageous to certain organizations or certain causes. Unfortunately, right now it's the Second Amendment.
Well, yeah, and I think another important aspect, I'm going to circle back to what the I guess sort of argument that we were proposing about whether or not Trump would be anti-gun based on this type of situation. Well, here's the thing. So what if what you're being told is pro-gun isn't as pro-gun as you're being told it is? Okay, so
right.
I mean, if the NRA supports red flag laws, if they support, obviously the bump stock ban and no telling what else, right? I know that there was some stuff floating around where they were supporting stricter background checks and things like that and expanding the NICS system. That's another thing I forgot about. So that's strike three, man. That's a lot of dirt that's just lining up. So if your only view of what being pro 2A is what the NRA is telling you, well, then you're setting up for failure. So I think at best, Trump is on probation with the gun owners of this country, right? He's got to undo some wrongs in order to even get back to the normal level that he was before. So I would say at best, he's on a bit of a probation. At worst, some could assume that possibly he had a general disposition against the Second Amendment coming into the presidency. I mean, it is quite known that he is a New York Democrat. What has always traditionally been a Democrat. A lot of people call Trump a rhino, so I think it's fair to mention that he does have a reputation for being a rhino. I will say this, though. I feel that Trump loves this country, and I'm a very good judge of character.
Are you now?
I am. Well, I'm friends with you. I don't know if that says much.
He is.
But I'm a pretty good judge of character, and when you look at body language, you look at the way people look when they talk, their conviction. I do get the feeling that Trump does love this country and does try to do what is best for America. He puts America first. And in my heart, I believe that. That's not a political talking point. That's just my reaction to Trump, like the way he acts. So is that to say that maybe after these, years that he's been president, has he had a change of heart? This whole thing that gets thrown around, this mud that gets slung at him as being a rhino. Okay, sure. People can change. People can have a change of heart. I mean, has he had a change of heart since he's been on the inside for a while and seen how things go? And also because he's seen all the hypocrisy and all of the snakes in the swamp, right? That was one of his big things, is draining the swamp from day one. So maybe Trump just, as he's gotten older and maybe just as he's gotten into politics, perhaps he's just had a change of heart, and maybe he sees the corruption and the horrible scab that has to just be torn off, right? Maybe he sees that scab needs to be torn off. And maybe it's not that he's anti-gun, but that he's been given the wrong information about what gun owners really want, and he's not listening to the right people.
Right.
Okay? I mean, let's be truthful here, right? I mean, we've called the NRA out on all their crap for years. Tim Harmson has at Military Arms Channel.
Yep.
Mike at Mr. Guns and Gears called them out on all their crap. Many of us have called them out continuously on their years of support of anti-gun legislation, okay? And I'm just afraid that the president is being given bad intel related to what the 2A community really wants. I mean, the NRA is comprised of 70-year-olds with double-barrel shotguns. They have a 70-plus member board that gets nothing done. It is purposely set up for failure. It is set up for lame duck inactivity, right? There's no attendance requirements, so someone can be on the board of directors and not show up for 9 months, and could walk in with a strawberry daiquiri and a Hawaiian t-shirt on and kick his feet up on the desk and go, well, what's been going on? Well, I don't even care. I'm on the payroll. There's no accountability for attendance, and it's just a giant
cesspool
Ponzi scheme.
You said Ponzi scheme. I say
why
cesspool.
would you want that being the determining factor of what bends the ear of your president on the Second Amendment? That, I think, is one of the big cruxes of this entire podcast.
Absolutely. And I would even go on to say that you should probably support at least, I think, two other organizations, which would be either GOA and FPC. I think both of those organizations do great work. They are at the forefront, especially FPC, of being proactive. Whenever they see something come out that is unconstitutional, or they are probably one of the first organizations to actively, I don't want to say the word sue because it sounds so litigious, but they actively combat those unconstitutional laws. And GOA does a great job of filling that void. I think they're very quickly gaining steam and speed with NRA members that are deciding that they just had enough and they want to put their money towards an organization that's actually going to be more effective.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a really weird situation overall, but I agree. I mean, GOA, Eric Pratt, Jordan, you guys, if you're listening, we support you. We've had Eric on Gun Gripes a couple of times. Great guy, very well-spoken, great on camera, and he's a great person to put up at the podium and argue with the antis. He's great at that, okay? And then, of course, the guys over at FPC, great guys. Both these organizations are putting their money where their mouth is. They are actually suing the crap out of these people. They're bringing about lawsuits. They're taking people to court. They are throwing around the legal weight
right
that needs to be thrown around to fight these things. And I'll just mention this, like whether you support the NRA or GOA or FPC or maybe your local group, like here in Georgia, we've got Georgia Carry.
Yeah, don't forget those guys. They're very
so
important.
if you join a local pro-gun group, even if it's just a state-level group, that's fine. No matter who you support, just keep in the back of your mind that this organizational effort, when it comes to fighting against anti-gun legislation, it starts with you. It is ultimately a grassroots level effort that we all have to take a personal responsibility in taking on, right? The GOA can put out a bulletin post that says, warning, this is happening, you should do something. Well, guess what? You still have to do something. Now, they can warn you, they can tell you it's going on, they can even give you a pre-typed letter that you can simply sign and send in. They can do part of the work for you, but at the end of the day, you have to take you have to be personally vested in caring about the Second Amendment and actually fighting this anti-gun legislation, right? So it's still very much an extremely grassroots thing. Early on when all of these accusations and bad things were coming out about what the NRA was doing and wasn't doing, it was all speculation there for a while. And then as documents start to surface, payroll stubs and receipts and expense accounts and all these things start to surface, then you start to see, there's a lot of waste and corruption. And then when you look at the visibility of electing board members, okay, and how messed up that situation was. Remember annual meeting, and we were all like pumping Adam Kraut, like, we're going to get Adam Kraut in, we're going to get Adam Kraut in. And we just knew it, man. Every single person that you walked by in the NRA annual meeting had an Adam Kraut button on there. I mean, we had it in the bag. We knew Adam Kraut was going to get on the board. Now, it was more of a, I guess for us, it was more of a sort of political, I guess you would call it a political move more than anything else, because with a board of directors that is comprised of over 70 members, and there's like 76 members on the board. Okay, getting one board seat
yeah.
Is that really going to make a difference, right? The issue is the board is so large, it's designed to fail. It's designed to be inefficient. They don't want the ship to move quickly and react to something terrible. It's a really, really weird situation. The organization is so big, and they have this sort of ability to go, I'm the biggest, I'm the best, I'm the craziest, and they have the numbers to throw around, and they have the money to throw around. And I guess that's just the scary thing about it. I mean, I've got varying opinions on how I feel about lobbying in general. You know, there are some places in the world, now this is not the United States, of course, but there are places in the world where lobbying is actually not even legal at all in terms of, you know, how the government deals with that sort of thing. So
right.
It's weird. I mean, the lobbyists have a heck of a lot of power in terms of, and it's not just gun related things. Okay, you look at everything from the tobacco industry, big tech, big pharma, the gun industry. It doesn't matter. Every industry has their lobbyists that go to Washington, and well, we're not gonna. We're not going to speculate, but they certainly pad some pockets, okay?
Oh, absolutely.
And that's not what lobbying is supposed to be, but that's what lobbying is.
And that's what it has to be now. I mean, I've seen stories, and I have read about it, that if you want to get something done, even at the state level, guys, this is how convoluted it's become, that you can't, even at the state level here in Georgia, if I walked in to the state representative's office or the state legislative office, and I said, here's a proposal for a bill, an SB, I want to affect change in my home state, like, oh, go see so-and-so, and they'll hook you up with the lobbyist group that'll get the right people in here to get it done. And I mean, it's almost like you have to go through the lobbyist group because they're the buddies of the people that can get you into the office.
Right. But the issue becomes, though, what happens when that lobbying effort is sort of a lame duck lobbying effort. Mm-hmm. That's where the real issue is, and I think that's where a lot of people have an issue. Is like, okay, so all these members are padding the pockets of the NRA constantly, here and there, here and there. I mean, it's all this money that's going into ILA and all this stuff, and then they're padding the pockets of the politicians and all this crap that's going on. But where's the benefit from it? Where are the good things happening, right?
Right.
It's almost like, all right, what is that buying us? Okay, the $1 million that they donated to Trump's campaign or whatever it was to endorse Trump, what did that buy us? Bump stocks being banned, and then what? Visible support for red flag laws. Trump going on record saying, I hate silencers. What kind of crap is that?
He's probably never even seen one.
All right. Now I want to, before we, end today's podcast and YouTube video, if you're watching, thank you for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed today's presentation. I mean, we're going all over in a lot of different directions, but that's kind of how we tend to do. I just want to mention, I will say this, Trump Jr., okay, Donald Trump Jr. I follow him on all the socials and stuff, and I view him as being a real red-blooded guy. Like, he's pro-gun. I mean, he shows pictures of them with rifles. He's got suppressors on his guns. Mm-hmm. He's out fishing, hunting, shooting, doing cool things with his kids, spending time with his kids, going out and going on fun adventures. And to me, it's like, I think that Trump Jr. has a really, really big part in this entire thing to play more than he thinks he does, because at the end of the day, there's still a family, right? And you know dang well that Trump Jr. can go, Dad, quit. Trust me, this isn't what people want. I mean, so I think that we're going to have to rely on Trump Jr. a lot more than you might think to kind of go to Dad and say, hey, I think you might be wrong about this. And that's all I would implore them collectively as a group of people to do, is just to try to understand where we're coming from. I'd like to think that we represent a heck of a lot of gun owners. I mean, we're at 2.4 million subscribers on YouTube and growing. We have 830,000 people on Facebook. I mean, we've got a pretty large following overall.
Over 3 million, it's safe to say.
Right. I mean, so there's a lot of people that, definitely tune into what we do. And I'd like to think that we have the ear of the people in terms of 2A. So I would only implore the Trump administration to look a little bit harder at what the 2A really is to our country and what they've done, what Trump has done to harm the Second Amendment communities. Not only our liberty that, you're going to make someone a felon overnight that owns a bump stock, but two, understand the ramifications of the people you're hurting. People like my friend Judd at Fostech, who now have a huge portion of their business and tons of employees that had to let go because they couldn't sell bump stocks anymore. And then turn around and treat them like crap over the SBV. I mean, Fostech's had a rough go.
It's rough, man.
They treated Judd and his family like crap. And this is real. This affects real people. It puts people out of a job, puts people out of work. It hurts American industry.
American companies, that's the thing.
It hurts Americans. Yeah. And, the perceived benefit of what you think banning a bump stock is going to do for your society will never outweigh the real lives of the people that you hurt at companies like Fostech, companies like SB Tactical, companies like SlideFire. All those guys, right, have suffered because of this poison Trojan horse of a bill. Well, not a bill, but an executive order.
Right.
So,
and that's the tricky thing about executive orders is that they can just be passed at the swipe of a pen based on an emotion, how they feel at the time. And everybody looks at it like that. And I understand there's additional processes that happen after that executive order is signed. But the weight that it carries from the president endorsing it, saying, hey, I've put my physical signature on this order, it does carry some weight for the whole legislative process to say, well, you know what, maybe we'll give them this win and we'll get it back somewhere else. And that, unfortunately, that's how politics is played. If he says, hey, give me this and I'll give you one later, I don't know what it is. It could be a year now. It could be the next term. Maybe this gets me the next term and I'll give you something on the next term. You just never know. And unfortunately, the victims here are the American people and the American businesses, because all the companies you named happen to be manufacturers that are based here in the U.S. that all had to let people go. Americans that were working hard that didn't have a job after this. And for what?
Not to mention that SlideFire had 100,000 braces destroyed.
Yeah.
Because of this whole thing. They came and they destroyed them. They confiscated them and destroyed them. That is legally owned. That's property. You're taking someone's property and destroying it.
And then just to backtrack on with Fostech, they had to provide returns and modifications for all of the shotguns that they sold that were technically firearms at the time.
Oh, they have to replace them.
Yeah, replace them.
That's the thing that sucks about it.
And it costs a lot of money. I'm not even going to put a dollar amount on it.
It's not a cheap gun to make.
And it's not a cheap gun you have to pay for ship. You can't ask that customer to ship it back at their expense. They've already, been turned into a felon from your product. So you have to give them oh my goodness. So when you think about it, you have to worry about all of that, everything. So what's going to happen to that weapon in transport? Is it going to get lost? Now you really, really have to make sure, come up with a missing serial number and see what happens, So just the chain of custody that has to take place for that. And then the cost of having to either replace it or modify it. All of that
and the heck with all that. I don't even care about all that. What I care about is hurting good people who have worked really hard and built a company over a really long period of time, and it's been a rough go. And they were really just starting to kick butt really, really, really well, and then they just got a kick in the you know what. But all right, so I will mention this before we sign off here. I did see something recently where Trump said that he would be supportive of some form of a national carry bill. But of course, again, just like Obama saying he wanted anti-gun this, anti-gun that, right? It's the same type of thing. If he has no support from the House and the Senate to actually get a real bill passed, right, then all it is just lip service. So that's the issue. Where was he with that lip service back when we had control of the ship, back when we had the ability within the Senate, the House, the presidency, obviously, to get all this pushed through? Where was that lip service then when we begged for it, we asked for it, and we were civil about it, asking respectively, hey, this is what we want, right? This is what the people want. So Trump is on probation with the 2A community. He's really got some work to do to right some wrongs that have been made. And I'm going to give him maybe the slight benefit of the doubt. And I'm going to say that maybe he's just been given bad intel. And judging by the endorsement of the NRA and what the NRA has supported over the last 100 years, I'm going to lean towards him being given bad intel as being a pretty large motivating factor for why those things happened in the first place.
And I would agree with you. And to backtrack or circle back to GOA, they are huge proponents of national reciprocity. And I'll tell you a funny story. I went to go visit my brother-in-law in Wilmington, and I had to drive from Georgia to South Carolina to North Carolina. And South Carolina does not share reciprocity with Georgia. And North Carolina is an open carry state, not concealed carry state. I mean, it's just those things. So like while you're going through these states, you have to be cognizant and mindful of these different laws. So of course, get out of Georgia and South Carolina, you can carry in your car. In Georgia, it's considered your home. So you can carry regardless, wherever you want. In South Carolina, you cannot. You have to keep it in your glove box or your back, out of hand's reach. In North Carolina, you cannot carry it in your glove box. It's against the law. And so you're driving through, like you have to physically go through, like, all right, what can I do here?
Yeah,
what
where am I a felon? Where am I not a felon?
Exactly. I mean, so we're making stops. Like my family, we're like, all right, got to put it back here. Got to put it over there. Because I'm not going to roll the dice. I got my daughter. I got my wife. I'm like, I'm not going to get into a run-in here, like going between on a family vacation. So
right,
just that would be a huge win. I mean, I don't understand why it's even an issue, but I mean, it is. And that was just a little story that I had to tell about that whole fiasco. And it was
well, certainly
rough.
Very thought-provoking. And I hope that we laid it out in a way. I mean, all of the historical aspects of the things that not only the NRA has done, but past presidents have done. I'm going to try to compile some data and share in the description box on the YouTube video and possibly the podcast to give you an idea of the amount of executive orders that have been signed by presidents in the last 20 years. We'll take a look at that data and sort of crunch that data. And also we need to crunch the data on the amount of gun legislation that has been supported by the NRA, which that's out there. But just to be thorough with this video and with this podcast, we want to make sure we provide that data. So I'll try my best to compile that data just so we can get an idea. It's certainly thought-provoking. And people need to understand that the people are the last defense between anti-gunners and their evil legislation that they're trying to push through. Anti-gunners are not your friends. People that want anti-gun legislation, that want to ban every dang type of gun you can imagine, are not your friends. Okay? We have to fight this at every turn, and it is up to the people. We have to, as a people, take a vested interest in our sovereignty and safety and our right to bear arms. We have to value it in a way that makes a strong statement to the people that would take our rights away. And that includes, making sure that all of our politicians are held accountable, right? That's the issue. There are so many different representatives out there. You look at from all different sides of the equation. You've got the House and the Senate and all of their underlings and all of these people that are sort of a buffer between the people and accessing those people. We have to scream louder. We have to fight harder. And we've got to make sure that these elected representatives know that we will boot them out if these conditions aren't met. We have to maintain solidarity for the Second Amendment. And I am a one-issue voter, and you got to let them know that you are a one-issue voter and that the Second Amendment is the one hot-button issue that you will kick them out for. And we have to maintain that solidarity. And with all the new gun owners that have been created just in the last 90 days over all the stuff going on, all the civil unrest, the COVID stuff, what have you, right? We have to make sure that we take that energy and we take that that strong push for our personal safety, and we turn it into positive energy that we can now take to the fight in Washington and get some of this anti-gun legislation that's been shoved down our throats all these years reversed and repealed, and get back to what the Second Amendment is supposed to be for all of us.
Agreed. And I just to wrap it up, I do not think Trump is as anti-2As as everybody thinks. I think he's just misinformed, like you said.
I agree. I think that's a safe assumption, and I think I'd make that bed and sleep. I'd take that bet. Let's put it that way. Guys, I definitely want to take a moment to thank all of you for tuning in. I know this has been a long one, especially if you're tuning in on YouTube. This is a very long form episode. I appreciate you sticking around.
Thank you.
Let us know what you think. And if you're listening in on the podcast, please leave us a nice review. And we really appreciate it. Have a great day. Go over to Ballistic Ink and pick yourself up a snazzy t-shirt that supports the podcast and our YouTube channel. And we really appreciate all of you who support us on Patreon, all of you who purchase man cans. We've got some great man cans for sale. We've changed the model up a little bit, but I know you guys are absolutely going to love the cans that we've got for sale. Really great items, good high-quality items,
stuff. Yep.
From really good manufacturers. You guys are going to love these boxes. So pick one up. All the man cam purchases, t-shirt purchases, Patreon support, all goes right back into putting out this content. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much who are watching for supporting us. And then thank you, the listeners. We're up to quite a few downloads each week.
Yeah, its support has been amazing. So
Yeah,
really appreciate it, guys.
Absolutely. Have a great day, and we'll see you guys soon. And this has been Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Life, Liberty, and Pursuit. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate that. You can support us over on Ballistic Ink by picking yourself up some merch. And remember, guys, dangerous freedom. Have a good one.